All right, welcome back to another episode of Getting Real with Bossy. I'm Kelly,
And I'm Kelly.
and we are here with Shelby Poole. Shelby, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, ladies. Um,
So happy.
I'm the founder of Betty Bloom Social Club. It is a mobile social club based on educating women and newcomers into the cannabis space to learn about how to integrate cannabis into their lives functionally and responsibly and answer questions and get things going for people, but focused on fun mainly.
Education, destigmatization, and fun, right?
Look at you, like no tagline. I started that differently, and I was like, all right, I'll just go with this. Yeah. So destigmatization is probably the biggest aspect of it because I'm sure that even if you use cannabis in the headline for this podcast episode, people are going to have something to say about it or immediately have some kind of response to it. And it's legal and it's a valid industry and it's one that's going to merge with a lot of other industries. And so getting used to talking about it and not feeling uncomfortable about talking about it is something that is a journey for a lot of people. They don't even know it yet. You both don't know it right now. We're about to hit it hard, but yeah. So just trying to approach that in a friendly manner so that it's not as intimidating as it needs to be, because it's a plant like tomatoes.
It's never made sense to me at all.
The stigma around it.
Yeah, because like growing up, it was like things like you're on the pot and like I don't know the things that were said and like the way things were reacted to. It was the same as like heroin, right? I remember being little and like not knowing like how bad things were when you would hear about somebody on drugs, right? Because it all got lumped together, and then when I got older, it was like this is not the same thing.
Correct. And the craziest thing is that technically, according to the drug schedule of the United States of America, it is the same thing, which is kind of mind-boggling. So, cannabis is a Schedule One drug for very political reasons, really having nothing to do with the effects of the plant. It goes back to really the early 30s, and even before that, the hemp industry. Hemp is a really amazing plant, and it's very versatile and it's very strong. And there were a lot of other industries that were like, let's hold up there.
Plastic.
Cotton stuff, and like we don't need your hemp paper getting in the way of our cotton paper, and that kind of extends to a lot of different arenas. So the mission to slow down the hemp industry and overregulate it has been many decades. And we talk about the movie Reefer Madness. I don't know if you are familiar with
Oh,
it.
yeah.
It was released in 1936, and it's a propaganda film that literally was also titled Tell Your Children. And it suggests that if you smoke weed, you will throw people off buildings, throw yourself off a building, you'll rape people, you'll dance uncontrollably.
And then the racial component too.
Huge racial component that came about, the war on drugs when that sprung up around Nixon's time, that kind of was taking hippies and black people were the two people of focus, or the two groups of people of focus, and kind of saying that like all these people that are associated with this awful drug, which again, Schedule One drug, at the time there weren't people being loud about the need to research the actual positive attributes of the plant. So yeah, the war on drugs disproportionately affected a lot of communities, most of which are still affected today, through incarceration, family members of incarcerated folks whose lives were kind of put on pause because of possession of this plant that is now legal and that is now up for conversation about rescheduling or descheduling, and a potentially thriving industry, and hopefully eventual federal legalization. So it's a pretty amazing journey that cannabis has been on in the past 100 years. And I think the next 5 years are going to be kind of mind boggling for people to realize that they're allowed to talk about it in a public forum without, you know, being looked at like a leper.
Do you think
Oh,
it'll change in 5 years? Sorry.
Yeah, I do think I
There's
think it's
just been like such a hard stop on everything.
Yeah, I think that it's changing every day. Honestly, I'm involved in an event tomorrow that's a really mainstream event, and it's a 500-person party, and it's centered around cannabis. I was at an event the other day that was again centered around cannabis, and so the opportunity for people. We're going through a pretty sober, curious movement right now. Um, People are drinking less than they ever have before. And I'm not going to naysay alcohol, although I don't need to. There are obvious attributes of alcohol that have led to really negative things in our society. I think people are coming to that realization. I think health and wellness has become so on the forefront. Mental health is something that has been on the decline, and the opioid epidemic is on the incline. And so this is kind of a perfect storm of opportunity for this plant to, have its moment in the sun and provide an alternative for a lot of these negative things that are going on in our society. So yeah, I think 5 years is totally valid. And I'm not the only person like me that's getting loud about it. There are at least three of me. So so we're trying to make this a movement. We're trying to make sure that, you know, the plant gets treated with respect, so that it gets treated as any other substance gets treated, not even a substance, really just like something that you can ingest and enjoy your life and have a good time. It's just a good old vice. And, I personally am making sure that moms and women and the people who are kind of trying to uphold what is a really hard time in the world right now, that we don't get left in the dust, and that we're able to utilize this plan to make our lives a little more fun and a little easier as well.
so let's go back a little bit because this is a huge part of your life now, but I think we kind of need to understand where it is that you came from, how you got into the hospitality industry in general, because I think that shows where you are, leads to where you are now. So you were born into the hospitality industry, correct?
Like a nepo baby of
You
restaurants.
are, yeah.
Yeah, my parents opened a restaurant when I was 6 years old. So my dad came home one day and he was like, I took a cooking class and I'm going to be in the restaurant business now. And so my parents opened a restaurant when I was little that I would go to work with them every Saturday and be a hostess. And I thought that I would leave the industry because, as we all in this room right now are aware, it is a very challenging industry and kind of like all encompassing. Like every one of my meals growing up was like us taking the plate at the dinner table and like flipping it over to see like who the manufacturer is, and like talking about like where people were getting their produce from. Like this was like normal dinner conversations with my family growing up. So hospitality, I would say, is pretty much like most of me. My personality is based on hospitality. I have a waitress personality. I'm like good for 45 minutes with you. Like we're good, and then I can move on. So yeah, it's been a long time. I have been running two restaurants on Long Island for the past 15 years, 17. It's been a long 17 years. Holy shit. That's a long time. Are we allowed to curse on here?
Yes.
Um, so 17 years we've been running, my husband and I. My husband is a chef. We met at the restaurant when I was a youngin'. Um,
You were in college, right?
I
When your
was.
parents hired him?
Yes, my parents hired him, and my mom called me in college and she said, "We just hired this guy. You're gonna love him." And I was like, "Oh, great!" And then I met him, and then a long while later, I went into my mom's office one night and I was like, "I do love him."
Your husband. It's like every mom's dream.
So
Hmm.
yeah, and they were obsessed with him. Like I didn't meet him for a long time because I was away at school, and by the time I got there, they were like, "We're making him a partner." Like they loved him, so it was like, okay, I guess I have no choice but to marry this man.
Right.
Um, Kidding, but also like we've been entrenched in it for a long time together. So yeah, we had been running these two gastro pubs, so very focused on our beer program. Realized pretty quickly on that craft beer was, a way to build community, and be kind of part of what was the trendiest thing that was going on at the time in the hospitality space. That was the most in line with the people that we were, which is community builders, a little bit scrappy. We are not wine people where we're like, we're going to go to France and like procure these rare bottles. We were like, we have red wine and white wine. Like, that's what we've got. And that's kind of how the snobbery of wine and the intimidation factor was what led us to craft beer, because we were like, well, this is just beer. And then ironically, craft beer evolved. The winification of beer happened pretty quickly. And that snobbery really applied very quickly to beer. So I guess we kind of ran a wine-ish program, like that's when you're building out a beer program like that, it's very winey. It's very, specific to regions, specific to origin story,
Mm-hmm.
and production process and storage process and all these things. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of my journey through the restaurant. Right before COVID, I was like, I'm done here. Um,
Famous last words.
famous last words. So
You
three,
only said that once?
no, I had said that for like literally for like going on all these like meditation retreats, and I was like, tell me the answer, but just make sure it's not the restaurant. Thought that the restaurant was running smoothly, and I thought, I have a bigger bandwidth than these restaurants, which is ridiculous to say because we know that that is a very more than full time. It's like a full life job.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking for fulfillment in other ways and moved to Blue Point Brewery, which is a craft brewery on Long Island. It's 25 years old and was purchased in 2014 by Anheuser-Busch. So I went to work for Anheuser-Busch, which was really amazing to go from a small business to a small business that had been eaten up by a giant corporation. So it was great because I got the best of both worlds in there. And I was doing PR, comms, and events, and I loved it. And part of my initial year there, well, first of all, COVID hit, so that was special.
Mm-hmm.
So COVID hit 3 weeks after I started.
How long did you stay with Anheuser-Busch?
I stayed with Anheuser-Busch for 3 years. The first year I was there, I had kind of said to them, like, you guys are hippies, and like, I know everyone in this building smokes weed. How come we don't celebrate 420 as a holiday at the brewery? And our GM at the time, Carrie Schaefer, who was a fantastic GM, also the only female GM out of all of Anheuser-Busch's craft brands. So it was really amazing to get to work with her. She was like, I agree with you, put 420 on the calendar. And we created a 420 festival, which for anybody that's not, I guess, cannabis focused, 420 is April 20th, and it's a day that is a you smoke a lot of weed and listen to music, and there are lots of different celebrations. So we launched a 420 party for that year. We did it in the parking lot during COVID, socially distanced with some vendors that you were only allowed to go look at the vendor if you weren't eating, but otherwise you had to be like sitting at a table because it was COVID. But it was still amazing. And then we scaled it the next year and it was 2,000 people. And then this year was 3,000 people in attendance. It was really the first time on Long Island and, probably in all of New York State where we were openly consuming alcohol and cannabis in the same space, and it was beautiful. It was diverse. It was socially responsible. People were recycling their cans like they had never done before. There was no anger. There was no bar fight. There were no ambulances called because people were kicking the shit out of each other. It was just like good old fashioned fun. And I think that realizing that that was kind of like an opportunity. I think for the first time, people, there are a lot of people like me who don't drink that much. I don't really drink at all anymore. I did because I was in beer and I was like, well, you have to like practice what you preach. So I would drink out of it was like this size, like a tiny little taster glass that I would drink beer out of. But I think for the first time, people were like, oh, like I can consume another vice and it's not, I don't have to be looked at any differently. Like now I'm kind of the one that's like the star of the show, and your beer can like, you can still have it, but it's not really the focus here. But the intersection has been it's been a cool place to be sitting. And I realized fairly recently that like, it's not that I've pivoted from hospitality to beer to cannabis. It's that I'm a hospitality person and I believe in the evolution of hospitality. And I think that that's where I'm sitting right now is like, how do we all play together in the same space and evolve as post COVID individuals who have been removed from society for quite some time. And, you know, now it's like, how do we come back together as our authentic selves, our maybe a little bit fucked up after COVID selves, our struggling selves, and just get to like be in an authentic way and just get to like be among each other, doing as we wish to be doing together.
Well, you were really at the forefront of craft beer in Long Island, and now you're transitioning to be at the forefront of cannabis, hopefully in the world. So I think you definitely understand trends. You're following along, and you're going to continue to be a leader. That's a heavy load. How do you manage that?
I mean, it's kind of exciting. Like, I mean, I love seeing people's faces. I think I manage it by like watching people's faces and getting to be around the people who are true naysayers, the ones who really do associate cannabis with heroin, because there are
Mhm.
so many people, and getting to just have conversations with them where they can see that like there's functionality of this plan. It's not people that are looking for an escape from the world. It's actually looking for people who are looking for like a new approach to the world. So I think just like energetically, like I've been a cannabis user. I mean, I didn't call it cannabis until recently. Like that's very highbrow of me. Like, you know, I smoked weed as a teenager and as a college student and a young adult. And like I've always been kind of a really motivated person and highly productive. And I attribute those qualities much to this plant. So showing people the different sides of it and the different ways that you can utilize it in your world, and that it's not just like, you know, I think we're in this place where like everything is black or white. Like we've reduced everything to no spectrum. There's no spectrum left. It's just like, are you this or are you that? Like I found out the other day that if whatever there you get pigeonholed in these areas, and that like, you know, I think that the excitement for me is the potential innovation in this space and all the different ways that you're going to see it applied to different aspects of life. So I guess the way that I'm balancing and keeping it together is just sheer excitement, honestly. And I like a full plate.
Well, that's the hospitality you.
Not like a full plate. I thrive with like, if I have like too much shit to do, like that's where I'm sitting pretty.
Therapist has to always remind me that your plate is you. So you can be full, but you have to be able to see little spots through it because you have to be on your plate too.
No, that's ridiculous. Don't even
Just
say
little
that.
spots, little spots.
A speck here and there.
Yep, that's all. Just a speck. It's just you have to see just a little bit of yourself in there.
Yeah, I think that this is like a really weird time in life, and like taking like I read something that like self-care is not like doing the laundry and like
No,
cleaning up the house. Like that's
that's
not
a
so.
chore.
And I mean, honestly, I'm in a field that like is kind of self-care-ish. Like I, you know, at the end of the night, like I sit on the porch with my husband and we smoke a joint and we talk about our day, and like we sit in rocking chairs and look out at the moonlight. So, you know, I think like maybe work smarter, not harder has been like a good mantra for me, that like I can pack a punch, and that just because I'm working doesn't mean I'm not also like being my best self. Like I can do both right now. I think. I mean, I don't know, maybe an hour ago I was crying, but like you don't need to we don't need to dwell on it. We can move on. We're multifaceted people, and like that's the whole point, you know?
Right.
There's more to it than, like losing yourself completely. Because let's face it, it's pretty easy to do, right?
Hmm. So is Harry primarily running the restaurant now and you get to focus on what you're doing?
Harry's running the restaurant. We talk, I'm always like, I'm always here for you. But then when he asks me to do stuff, I'm like, what do you expect me to do everything? Which I think is like typical of like working with your spouse in this kind of industry. So I still run the social media for them. And we're working on maybe pivoting the concept a little bit to something that is a little more takeout friendly because consumer behaviors have changed and
Hmm.
consumer changed. So got to keep up with the times. Um, or like I don't know, I daydream about like Harry going and working at a ski mountain. I like sit in the lodge all day and write a book and like that's our life and we just like take it all away. Yes.
That sounds amazing. I'll be there.
I know. Did you notice I'm not skiing on the ski mountain?
Yeah, no, we're cozy with a brandy and a joint and writing our book.
Yeah. I'm like
Perfect.
that. I'll take a cocoa.
I am in.
Mhm.
Yeah, I always think about like what is this desire that we have to always be like doing and like producing and making things happen. And it's like, I don't know, I'm talking to two highly productive women. So I imagine that this is like a relatable thing where you're like going, you're going, you're going, and then you're like, but wait, why? Like what
When did success be defined by how much you've done
or
instead
how
of who you are and what you've accomplished?
right. I have been going through it a lot because I launched Betty Bloom in February. I launched it predominantly for timing because I knew I couldn't wait for another 420 to pass to launch my brand, not necessarily because I was ready. And I've kind of been chasing after it this whole time. And through the past 6 months, I've had really great wins and really great successes, highlighted by a heated conversation with a senator that both of you witnessed.
Hmm.
That led to some serious wins in the space that I'm in and in my quest for making this plant have some upward momentum. And yet I come home and I go, well, I didn't, I'm not making the money I want to be making and money, 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 money. And it somehow negates the wins that you have because we are as a society so obsessed with working our monetary value and I've been trying to put a lot of thought to it. I haven't figured out the answer. If you know the answer, you just let me know. But I just never thought that I was like a person where money needed to be a focus. And now I've noticed that it's like kind of suggesting what my wins and losses are, which is such a shame.
Right. Can we go back to February? Because we were all together in New York in March of this year, and that was the first time I heard the name Betty Bloom mentioned. And I'm curious how it all got started and where the name comes from.
So I made a pact with myself that I would tell a different version of who Betty is for every time I talk about Betty Bloom.
Wonderful. I can't wait.
So for today, we'll go with Betty and Veronica. No, actually, I don't want to go with Betty and Veronica. She's too like perfect. Um, Honestly, it's just like name a bad Betty. Like there are just a lot of good Bettys. My maiden name is Bloom, so I knew that it would be cool to utilize Bloom. Um, Frankly, the concept came way before the name. I didn't talk about the concept um, for so ultimately the concept for Betty Bloom is that we provide kind of like intimate parties for people to ask questions about cannabis and learn about different cannabis brands that are available in the market because you don't walk into Target and just say like I need dish soap. You're like I need Dawn or whatever. Like we are a society that is programmed to know names and nobody knows any names in the space. So my goal was to educate based on actual brands that are available that people could walk into a dispensary, which is a very overwhelming experience if you've ever been to one. It is not feminine. It is not approachable. It is not typical retail. And so I was like, there needs to be some kind of segue for people who are interested in this space. So that's where Betty Bloom kind of came about. But I didn't talk about it for a really long time because I was like, it's not real if there's no name. And then one night, actually, I have a Betty Boop hanging on my wall. I was looking at it and I was like, Betty Bloom. Okay, that's what we're going to do. And then I said it to a couple of people and they were like, oh, yeah. And she's kind of gone in her own direction ever since. Oh, and then I got these glasses. And the glasses were really like, they kind of go with the theme of like this. I go for Tupperware party. I go for Tupperware party. Let's take exactly how women were. If we could freeze women in the 50s and put them into today, we can kind of say, like, not much progress has actually really happened. In the 50s, women who were starting Tupperware parties were highly motivated business women, and they really don't, there's not really been a tremendous amount of, we say there's a lot of progress, but there hasn't actually been a lot of progress in that time. So, you know, I've trying to model that aesthetic and that idea of that time of like, you know, how can we actually take that mentality of the 50s and apply it to today where we're a little louder about the fact that we are ready to take things to the next level, aka just like destroy the patriarchy. Like, how can we apply Tupperware parties to destroy the patriarchy? That's really where I'm at right now. But I got
Love
these
it.
glasses and everybody seems to think that they're like my shtick. And so like that's kind of just been the thing that's driven home the brand, which is insane to say. But then you think about it and you're like, okay, there's a lot of companies that have like a signature thing on people. Like Mr. Clean has a bald head. Imagine
Right.
Mr. Clean, or you wouldn't recognize him. I don't know.
So, what are you doing now with Betty Bloom? Is it mostly events?
Yeah, so ultimately Betty Bloom is an agency model where I work directly with brands and serve as a conduit between cannabis brands and non-cannabis brands to do what I did at Blue Point, which is take the cannabis lifestyle and incorporate it into other areas of life. So health and wellness, education. So it's really like holding hands with individual brands and kind of like joining them together and saying like, you two have synchronicity here. You just don't know it yet. Or, you know, you want to look authentic. Well, here's a group that's going to help you be authentic. So that is my area of focus right now, is getting the right cannabis brands on board for wanting to turn their marketing efforts to a more partnership based focus and community based focus. Really big on cooperative big business practices. So you know, right now it's like getting players in the room, uh, and incorporating them into my programming. And yeah, it's predominantly event focused. So once a month, I do an infused dinner and a movie at our restaurant Jackson's in Comac. I It's a themed movie, so a themed menu to go with the movie. So I did Dazed and Confused, I did Half Baked, Friday the 13th, and then I don't know what I'll do for November. Have any ideas on that? Something with, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I'll do.
I'll think on that. I'll get back to you.
So I do that. I do a flea market where I have vendors come in. And then right now I'm in the throes of planning a pretty large International Women's Day event called Mainstream Mary. And that is, it's a completely interactive event. So a lot of these events that I've gone to in this industry are like people on a stage talking to you and telling you what the industry is going to look like. And it's very industry focused. Mainstream Mary is actually focused outward, and it's a policy and politics free conversation and guided brainstorm on how to destigmatize and turn cannabis into a mainstream object that you can have. So it's a guided brainstorm. It's utilizing techniques from Amazon and from Walt Disney. There are all different really creative brainstorming techniques that different corporations and creative entities have used through time to find the successes that they have had. So we're going to take that and we're going to apply it to cannabis. And like, how do we talk to kids about it? Do we talk to kids about it? How do we incorporate it into working out? Can you use it as a pre-workout? How do you message? How do you use it as a pre-workout? How do you message the kind of dosing that there should be? You know, all the different kind of aspects of life. I think that right now there are a lot of political conversations that go on in this space, but I kind of believe that social affects politics, or can, right? Right now we're in a place where politics are affecting everything. There's nothing that politics, like everything is trickling down from there. But you know, as we've seen in person from people in rooms, that there is a lot of misinformation that's being put out there about this plant. And so you know, mainstream Mary is all about making sure that that information is effective and safe and responsible information, so that it can get disseminated to the different areas of life, thereby affecting change politically, because people have a better knowledge base and they see better of what we're talking about when we talk about normalizing cannabis. And that's going to be at West Industry Studios, which is an awesome production house on Long Island. And we're going to be recording the whole session. And we're going to have breakout podcasts. You should come down for it. And yeah, it's going to be something special. And it all opens up with a screening of the movie Reefer Madness, um, which again kind of got the ball rolling on this whole negativity towards cannabis in mass. So we're gonna flip the scripts.
Well, that's what you do, though. We've seen you, both of us have seen you in so many conversations where you have to be the educator and you don't back down anytime and you stand your ground. And it's incredible to watch. I don't know how you do it. It seems exhausting, but you make your point known. Hmm?
I cry afterwards.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I
Oh my
understand.
god, somebody hates me. I don't back down. I don't back down in the things I believe in. I mean, we have platforms and we have freedom of speech. So like do the math, you know? You're allowed to like get loud about the things you believe in, and like I'm a big practitioner of love and unity, and anything that I see that has potential for that, I will always be loud about.
You're
And then I'll
amazing. So what is the marriage between, I mean, Kelly and I were talking about this just before, between alcohol and cannabis? Is there a happy ending for that, do you see? I mean, we are moving more towards a sober, I mean, we have a pretty significant non-alcoholic cocktail list, and I know a lot of places are moving towards that. And one of the reasons we do that is because we are seeing more people out and about who don't want to be drinking because they are enjoying cannabis, or they just don't want to be drinking because that's just not part of their lifestyle anymore. So, what would you like to see the future be?
the perfect world, which I think that there might be some, like there's a little sliver of a door open. So, you know, I'm gonna try to stick my foot in it. Um, I would really love to see anybody that has a liquor license be able to also opt into selling cannabis beverages. I think that again, like the black and whiteness of an entire industry makes it that you don't think about cannabis beverages. You know, people tend to think like, oh, it's all smoking weed, and it's like it's not about the smell. We don't even have to talk about the smell. We know that that's insulting to some people. We can move past that, and I think that the place that we can most effectively move past that is in canned beverages. That's going to be a space that absolutely explodes. So for the restaurant and bar industry to not have a place in that conversation, I mean, first of all, it's just not very irresponsible, because you want to make sure that you're providing products with food. That's just something that you always want to do across the board. Like there's you don't walk into 7-Eleven and they say like we don't have snacks, we only have drinks and water and beer. Like it doesn't work like that. So, you know, I think for the success of the restaurant industry, which is obviously stunted and going through some really tough times right now, expanding opportunity for the restaurant industry is pretty critical. And also, when you apply for a liquor license, you're signing away your liability, and you're effectively proclaiming that you are responsible for the people ingesting substances in your place. If you would like to choose another vice to be representing, like, there's absolutely, like, it's nonsensical that they be segregated. So, for me, I think that the future of the industry and the intersection between alcohol and cannabis is that they get to live in the same space from a consumption standpoint, and that if somebody wants to make decisions on behalf of their own bodies, they can do that. Like, they should be allowed to do that. And so there are going to have to be a lot of conversations with people that are in different camps. You know, I call the Office of Cannabis Management, I call it the Eve to the State Liquor Authority's Adam, because it's spun off of the Office of Cannabis Management is spun off of the SLA. And so since they've become two entities, they don't interact and they don't engage. They're operating as two separate models, but it's all vices. It's all 21 plus substances that you're ingesting. And so, like, I'm hoping that that merges a little bit. And, I'm working to figure out how there can be, how people like me can help and aid in that conversation, people who have a hospitality background. And I just think general hospitality in the cannabis space is really important. Like, I've gone to a lot of events that have a really loud DJ and don't have a lot of water, and, like, those are, like, the two basics for a cannabis event. Like, people want to talk to each other. They don't necessarily want a DJ blasting over them. They actually do like human interaction and conversation. And, like, you get cotton mouth and you have the munchies. So, like, have food, have drinks, and, like, allow for people to just, like, chill out and relax and get creative and get crafty and get deep, because that's kind of what the industry allows. So the way I look at it is, like, let's start focusing a lot towards making cannabis users feel included in the hospitality space, and then kind of see how it shakes out. And as far as sober curious, I don't blame people. I'm sober curious myself. I'm actually what they call California sober, which is very fancy. It just means that I don't drink and I smoke weed.
Gotcha.
But it sounds really cool. And I think there'll be a lot of stuff going on in that space too.
I have a political question.
I'm bad at these.
So I love everything you're saying, right? And it's like this perfect world, and you're putting on these events, and I want to go to them all. And I also, on the other side, have a restaurant that employs a lot of people that live in the city of Rochester. And the city of Rochester right now has a huge spike in gun violence that has been called by the chief of police to be completely because the state legalized marijuana and then didn't allow any shops to open. So by the legalization of it, the black market exploded, and a bunch of gangs apparently moved into Rochester to control the drug market. With that being said, I am constantly having people having to leave work because of gun violence. So it's like I see both sides of this, right? So I'm like, I love it. And I've always thought it should be legal ever since I realized that it wasn't what I was told it was, right? And the fact that it's not, and I think, what are we at, 7 legal stores right now? And then they opened one in Rochester, but then I think they closed it back down. I mean, the illegal stores are everywhere.
Legal stores are everywhere. There are like 26 as of today.
Okay.
And right, there were 463 licenses that were issued. And the goal was for many of them to be open by now. So, right, the rollout of this industry, like, sure, I'm talking about like the sunshine and bubblegum version of this, but, like, there's for sure not just even one dark side of it, but like a lot of dark sides of it. Like the territoriality of cannabis in New York before legalization was already insane. New York was moving more metric tons of weed than any other state in the country. So like there is already a thriving industry going on. So, you know, yes, the black market has gotten larger. It is mind boggling to see how many shops are open and selling and no qualms about it. And yet the people that have like gone through the proper steps and the proper avenues to get to a legal shop are unable to open. Like there's some serious, you know, I imagine there's a lot of corruption at play. Like I don't imagine, there's a lot of corruption at play. Like that is just point blank. That is true. And that's for everything in life. And that's shit. As far as the market, the unregulated market taking over and causing violence, yeah, it's a serious problem. And the lack of mass education on procuring legal products and regulated products is absent. There is none. And so there's no way for people to know where they should be buying these products from. Like there's one dispensary on Long Island. That's it. Most people are not getting their product from a legal dispensary. They're getting it from the unregulated market, which is like, again, it's been happening for generations and generations, right? Like these are legacy people who have been involved in this industry. So it's not to negate the validity of it. There are some people that have valid businesses that are unregulated businesses, and that was by force because it wasn't legal. So, you know, it's not like the market didn't exist because it wasn't legal. The market existed because there's always been demand for it, and it's a plant that you can grow. And so it's pretty easy to keep that going. You know, the big conversation is that the more we educate people and the more stores that are legal, that are open, the less people will go to these black market shops and the less power they will have to be driving down the price of products and moving products and selling products that might be laced with things that are not okay, or products that are out of code from another state that are coming in. Like it's a huge problem. And you know, I think the biggest unfortunate aspect of it that I've picked up on, and this is just, I try to stay, I really like, politics freak me out because I'm like, I'm not acting like I know what's really going on because I'm only seeing the media's version of what's really going on. Or, you know, you're telling me the story of what's going on in your town. Like, that's not something that comes down to Long Island. Like, nobody's shouting that from the rooftops by any means on Long Island. It's horrifying and so sad. And I do think that cannabis is like a really easy crutch for people to fall on and say like, oh yeah, no, it's because of this, when like, no, I mean, there's also like a huge mental health issue, and like there are gun control laws that are like broken in our state and in our nation. And so like to, you know, to put it just on that one piece of information, which is that like cannabis is causing it, is like a little bit of like a,
Well, for the violence in Rochester, it's not cannabis that's causing it. It's the legalization slash not rollout of legalization that's causing it, because it's a market that they could come in and take over without having to worry about getting in trouble.
right. And go back to where I feel like there's a big issue is that the regulation, the all like these shops that are popping up all over the place have fallen under control of the Office of Cannabis Management. And so now you're taking this very new organization in the state, it's a state organization. They're responsible for creating all of the legal rollout. They're responsible for, you know, being sued, frankly, like left and right, because that's what's going on right now. They have to create all the policy, they have to enforce all the policy, and they have to enforce the opening of these legal shops without the support of local municipalities. And that's just like not realistic. It's just not. And, you know, I don't I don't know how anybody could expect that an organization could just pop up and be like, yeah, we're going to shut down all these places. Also, we're going to make sure that you get your license, that you're a social equity applicant, that you're getting all the resources that you need. Like, you know, I just find that like this lack of unity across the board with municipalities in general is just a big problem. Like and obviously this is a larger conversation, but it's a shame that people just don't talk to each other. And I think that, like, really in the most basic form, when I brought up the Office of Cannabis Management and State Liquor Authority don't communicate with each other regularly and have, united front there, that's the first example of a bajillion examples of how, like, the lack of working together is going to kind of keep this snowballing, until the snowball falters and they do start shutting down these shops, which really has to happen. It's not okay. It blows my mind. I don't understand it myself. Nobody understands it. It's, like, New York City is fining landlords if they open the shops, and yet they're still opening. So it's like I have no idea how it got to this place, and I'm hoping that with more regulated shops opening and more people getting on board with mass education of where to procure safe and legal products through the state, like, that's campaigns that need to be happening right now. And I hope it gets better in Rochester, because that sucks.
So while we're on touchy things, um, I remember when I had my first daughter and like Facebook was just kind of like blowing up, right? Like, so social media, I'm aging myself here, but she was born in 2009. I had Facebook, but it was just starting to like get big. Like I was still uploading pictures from my camera, right? When she was little. Um, but one of the things that always bothered me was how okay it was to have play dates and moms would drink wine. And I'd be like, well, I have to drive home. Like, can I just smoke a little? Like, well, I'm stressed out and I'm tired. Can I talk about how I just want to get high and watch TV? Like, do I have to drink wine? It was always so focused on like drinking as a mom. And it just drove me insane. And it's like, why is it okay? Do you see that shift happening? Like, I'm not really in mom groups anymore, but is there a shift to welcoming pot smoking moms?
No, there's not. It is.
Can we put
No,
wine in quotes?
what'd you say? Oh, like, yeah, I need my wine. Mommy needs
Yeah.
her wine. Um, no, I've seen curiosity from people that are like, because I'm an out. I do think we need, like, some kind of, like, national coming out day. I really want to do, like, October's October. We've, like, celebrated October in the LGBTQIA plus community, in the queer community. We've celebrated that for so many years, and I really want to do one for cannabis where you, like, come out and then we, like, donate money to a local queer organization, because I'm like, how do we get people to be proud of this? No, it hasn't happened yet. There are people even within our circle, right? We all know each other from one specific place, and there are people who are impactful in our circle who will not come out as users of the plant, even though they are proud. They use it, they accept it, they accept the lifestyle, but they're not prepared to talk about it themselves. No, the stigma hasn't gone away. It hasn't gotten better. I went to a networking event with a bunch of women yesterday, and I talked about my industry, and the whole entire time, they made jokes about weed. And it was like, do you hear yourself? So every time I was like, okay, well, every time you say something about me smoking weed, I'm going to say something about you drinking a glass of vodka, because that's what a martini is. It's a
Mhm.
glass of vodka. So I'm going to talk about you drinking a glass of vodka at dinner. And we can do it this way. And, like, and I said to one girl, like, I think that you misunderstand that, like, because I'm pro cannabis, you think I'm stoned all day. Like, that's not the case. It's not the case at all. Like, I use it for very specific moments in my day. I use to unwind with my husband at night. Not that that needs justification. And I use it during the day as a micro dose to focus, because sativa, there are some products out there that are very specifically made for focusing, and I'm not really like a meds kind of person. So I use it to focus. And even though those are legitimate, reasonable things to say, no, I've found that the commonplace mom group is still going to default back to, she's a stoner and she's a pothead, and that's a shame. And I think that the more people that are open about it and that are non-judgmental about it, the better it'll get. And I'm kind of at a place where I accept that this is the way people are going to speak, and I just kind of follow things up by saying, like, if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer it. Like, anything I can do to make it more accessible and less intimidating for people. Like, we mock what we don't know. It's not that we, are. I'm sure that a lot of these moms, like one of my favorite wine and Xanax moms, I turned on to gummies this year, and she was like, I would take a gummy every night and never have a Xanax again. And I was like, that's great, because Xanax is kind of cracky. And so, like, maybe you should consider that. So, like, it's one person at a time. It's gonna take a while. And I think that's why my model for Betty Bloom is so focused on small groups, because it's intimidating to be in a group and to be the outlier. And I get it, right? This is high school and middle school for the rest of our lives. Like, we always just want to fit in. We always just want to, like, be with the crowd. It's just like the way we seem to be programmed to want to do that. Like, when we're in a group of moms, if we're at the PTA meeting, that we can't be the one that stands out. And that's a shame. I think that the three of us kind of disprove that, right? We're like, whatever, like, fuck all the haters. We'll just do our thing. But it's not like we don't all return to our homes at the end of the night and go, like, was I too much? Was that too much? Did it come off too strong?
Mhm.
Like, we all tend to question each other because ultimately we just want to conform, and the conformity seems to just be wine, and I don't understand it. We'll get there. We're gonna get there.
Well, you're getting us there.
I hope so. It's like, I come home and I laugh about it. I'm like, this is insane. But, to the positive here is that there are brands out there that know that they're going into this with people not being able to necessarily segue. And so they're doing it through their packaging, they're doing it through their marketing, and they're putting themselves out there in a way that's, like, super mainstream. Like, if you look at Heirloom drinks, Heirloom is owned by Beacon Skiff Orchards, and they do 1911 hard cider. So, like, they have a non-alcoholic, they have an alcoholic, and now they have a cannabis drink. Their lemonade, first of all, is just next level. It's so good. They just did a Honey Crisp apple cider. Like, when you look at Heirloom, it's not an intimidating drink. It looks like something that you would want to pick up and try. So, these brands that are kind of like they're doing the work too. Like, they're going to make it that I'm going to bring a 4-pack of Heirlooms out to my girls' night, and people are going to want to try it because they're like, oh, I like cider, So, like, there are a lot of ways to be, like, entering this space right now, and I think it's really cool to watch the brands that are doing the best jobs with it.
And I
Any
love when
others you want
people
to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I mean, Eaton Botanicals is based out of Syracuse, and they're the first hemp farm in New York State. Their side, or it's not their side business, their main business is actually, they create bedding for livestock. Eaton Pet and Pasture is their main business, and they spawned off and they did Eaton Botanicals, and it's a low THC, so it's 5 milligrams per gummy. The max in New York State when you're purchasing at a dispensary is 10 milligrams. So it's a lower milligram dosage. And it also has vitamins in it, and it has adaptogenic mushrooms in it. And it was developed with scientists and doctors and mycologists to be extremely functional. You can use it as a pre workout. There's a nighttime gummy that is far more effective than melatonin, because melatonin makes you fall asleep, but then you're, like, up scrolling on Instagram at 3 o'clock in the morning. Actually gets you to sleep, which is really cool. So they're great. Her Highness is a brand that is just launching their THC products, and they have a party pack, and, like, everything is, like, cute and feminine and fashionable and glitzy and gold, and they have, like, giggly puffs is their pre-rolls, and so, like, it's just, like, a little more accessible and fun, and something that you can bring to a girls' night and be like, maybe the girls will be like, oh, I would attempt that over my that thing that you, like, stick in the wine bottle, and it, like, is a glass, and so you're like, oh yeah, I'm drinking a glass of wine, but it's, like, actually the whole wine bottle. How is that a thing? And
and that's okay.
yeah,
Hmm.
And if I want to smoke a joint, it's like, oh no. Crazy. We're getting there. We'll get there. Are you there? Let me see. Let me see. Light up your joint. No, I'm just kidding. It's
We're in a hotel.
Well, and I love when people are like, well, my kids, they're going to eat the gummies. And I'm like, well, my kids know not to drink my drink. It's just
Right.
teaching them that there are certain things they can't eat. If it's not in the snack cupboard, they walk up to my drink and they're like, can I have that? I'm like, it's water. They ask no matter what. Like they know
yeah,
that
it's
there's a
all
chance.
yeah, and it's okay to talk to kids about it. Like this is a legal substance. They're going to eventually be adults, and like it would be nice to give people like you will talk to your teenage kid about drinking, right? And you'll say like, I think it's important to talk to kids about drinking a bottle of beer and drinking a bottle of tequila are two very different things, right? And so like dosage in the cannabis space, like talking about milligrams in something isn't like, I'm not saying my 6-year-old needs to know how many milligrams to be ingesting, but I have a 13-year-old daughter and I know what's floating around out there and she knows what's floating around out there, and like she knows what I do. So, we have a different dialogue than most people do, but it is kind of like practice for me on how parents should be talking to their kids about it, because there are people in the unregulated market that are making edibles that are 100 milligrams. And like for anybody, adult, teenager, anybody, it's important to know that that's too much to be consuming in one time, especially if you're not a user. Or, I mean, I would never. It blows my mind that people do this. But like, it's okay to be saying to your kids, this is the label that's available in New York State that is the regulated label. If somebody is trying, if you are so interested in experimenting, I never want to see you even look twice at an item that doesn't have this label on it, that isn't regulated in New York State, that has been lab tested. Like maybe she's not going to use that now. She's not. I'm pretty hard up on her being a nerd for as long as possible. But when she gets to college, she better know what she's looking at that's safe and regulated and unsafe and unregulated. Like that's an important difference that we really do need to talk to teenagers about. And it shouldn't have to be something that's scary. It's the same way you would talk to your kids about alcohol. And you're right. I have alcohol in my house. And it's so interesting that we never think twice about the fact that they have immediate access to alcohol and we don't question it. We have Tylenol in our house. We don't say, oh, I got to make sure, the Tylenol is in a lockbox in the back of my closet so that no one can ever know that I even have it. Unrealistic. It's unrealistic for that. And, as we make more progress, it's unrealistic for cannabis too, I think. Or there's someone like that's going to hear this and be like, fuck that girl, but I don't think so,
Well, 100%.
Of course there are. Of course there are. And that's okay. Because again, going back to the beginning, it's a Schedule 1 drug. It's painted in a way that it should be naysayed. And it's painted in a way that we shouldn't be talking about it. And, hopefully that's changing. And again, 5 years from now, we can look on this and say like, oh my God, remember when, weed and alcohol were like totally different entities? Like this is not a forever thing.
I feel good about it because my mom and dad understand it.
Hmm.
When we were teenagers, they did not. It took we're talking 30 years of education on just two people and their experiences because they had the information they knew. A lot of it came from like post Vietnam, and like everyone they knew that smoked pot was fucking insane. Well, they were probably fucking insane because they just got out of the war, but you don't like, so they had what they knew, and it's illegal and it's a Schedule 1 drug, and and that was it. And 30 years of education, and they seem to understand it and like get that it's not the same thing as heroin. It's not what they've been told it is.
Medically available and provides a lot of pain for a lot of people. So I think when you get to that demographic of people, they're actually the best spokespeople for it, because find me people who are 65, 75, who aren't suffering from some kind of chronic pain or have some kind of ailment that they're trying to find relief from, and this is finally something where they're finding relief. we stood at the dispensary. We were standing at the door for maybe 25 minutes the other day, just kind of paying attention to who walked in. We were at Housing Works, which was the first dispensary to open in New York City. And in my opinion, one of the finest. I think they give the best, they are the most helpful as far as the user experience, helping you find what's right for you. Um, I would say that 75% of the many people that walked in were over the age of 70. And
Mhm.
that's really nice to see that people are not turning to addictive prescribed drugs, because that those are the other options, and that they're turning to a natural alternative that they can find some relief, or just want to get stoned and play video games, because you can be 75 and do that too. You
Right.
know, always want to remind, like, this is all really about fun. It's about having a good time. You don't like talk about wine and say like we got to get serious about wine. Like, no, you want to have wine to unwind and like enjoy your night, or if you're me, get sick immediately and regret it.
Well, we know where you want to see the industry in 5 years. Where do you want to see Betty Bloom in 5 years?
She'd love to go on vacation.
She deserves a vacation. Yeah, how do we get her out of Long Island and just traveling the country spreading the message?
So I am going to be spending the next couple months kind of turning inward on Betty Bloom, and planning for how I want to see her grow. So I'm laying really low on programming for the next couple months so that I can get my business on, which as a woman in her not her first career is very daunting to like be like, oh yeah, let me just learn about startups. Like, I'm a small business person. I just know like my QuickBooks, I don't know how to expand a business. So, but I want to. That's where I would like to be expanding indefinitely. And I don't know where Betty Bloom is going to be in 5 years. Um, I guess if I had my way, like Virginia Slims, every woman in America would feel happy taking out her pack of pre-rolls and smoking one if she needs it. That's where I'd like Betty Bloom to be in 5 years. She
Vision.
Mhm.
That's my Virginia Slims. Let's see what happens in 5 years if it's on it.
Can people find out more information about that?
I guess you can sign up for my newsletter, but everything's kind of housed on my Instagram, which is Betty Bloom Social Club, or bettybloom.biz is my website.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks for
And
joining us today.
thank you. Thank you for having me. You're some bad bitches and I love it.
We're Bad Betties.
Betty's. I love Black Betty. Can we play that in as our theme song for this segment?
Yeah, my Betty Bloom playlist. I mean, the first one is by Taylor Swift, because come on.
Yes.
Are you Swifties?
I wish.
Ugh, it's the best. What a
I
way of
fell
life.
for her during Evermore and Folklore.
Oh my God. I listen to folklore every day. That's
Oh
my
my
work.
God, those albums are amazing. So
Really
I'm not
bad.
a Swiftie, I'm an Evermore Folklore Swiftie. And then like I appreciate her popular music. Like I will dance along to a Taylor Swift song.
That's okay. You recognize that she goes deep, and that's
Yeah.
important.
More important, I am a it doesn't work. I was going to say I'm a Shelby, but that's your whole name. I was trying to do something cute here and I just failed miserably.
It's all
We
right.
think you're amazing.
We do. We think
That's
you're awesome.
basically what she's saying. We just think you're amazing.
You're just like one step down from Taylor Swift.
She's like my she's like my goal. Well, Martha's my goal. Martha's my real goal. And then Taylor is like, I don't know what is wrong with me where I think that like getting her in a room smoking weed is like reasonable, but like I actually think that that's like totally gettable.
I
So,
think so too.
right?
All right.
She
Betty
went to
Bloom Vision.
she's getting there. She's circling, so I'll just like pull her in. But if you know Martha Stewart, give her a call and tell her to reach out.
Oh my
We'll do.
gosh, Martha's on it. And then you get an immediate connection to Snoop.
Mhm.
Um, I'm like, I love Snoop so much, but like Martha's my
Hashtag Martha Stewart. Hashtag Taylor Swift. Get with Betty Bloom.
Yeah, exactly. Do it. Do it, please. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Shelby. BettyBloom.biz
Yeah,
and Betty Bloom Social Club on Instagram.
you got it.
And
Yeah,
we will be in touch to find out what happens next.
I know. Stay tuned. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know what it is. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby.